Art has always been a form of expression for human beings. In all of its forms, art has allowed humans to express their feelings, celebrate important events, influence public opinion, encourage action, and even denounce atrocities or injustice. Also, either consciously or not, the cultural background of an artist influences his or her work. This way, art also acts as a cultural mediator and a promoter of intercultural dialogue. But what happens when works of art get extracted from their countries of origin? The following video will analyze different works of art that were extracted from their countries of origin by means of theft or loot, with the purpose of proposing actions where art can serve as a bridge for conflict resolution. The Elgin Marvels, or the Parthenon Marvels, are a collection of classical Greek marble sculptures that were originally part of the Parthenon, located in the Acropolis of Athens. The Parthenon was built in the mid-5th century and became one of the most important buildings of classical Greece, showcasing the values of Greek society at the time such as symmetry, balance, beauty, and order. But how did some of the sculptures end up in the British Museum anyway? Well, Thomas Bruce, 7th Earl of Elgin, became the ambassador to the Ottoman Empire in 1799. In 1801, Elgin was said to have received authorization to survey, analyze, and even take some of the sculptures, and he did. Ever since Greece won independence from the Ottoman Empire in 1832, successive Greek governments have petitioned for the return of the works, and in the 1980s, the government formally asked the museum to repatriate the art, citing the fact that the authorization for the removal was given by an occupying empire, not the Greek government. With some of the sculptures in the Acropolis Museum and the others in the British Museum, one can argue that they should be reunited in their place of birth so visitors can fully understand and appreciate them as a whole. In 2021, a UNESCO advisory board responsible for facilitating bilateral negotiations between countries on the matter of cultural property advised the British Museum to revisit its stance on the marvels. Nonetheless, the English government, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and the British Museum have all argued that the return of the marvels is off the table.
Douala, Cameroon has a great tradition of boat competitions. Every year, the annual water festival is held, in which the most important families of the community participate. As a last preparation for the ceremony, a wood carving is prepared. It's part of the ship spur and is called the tangue, and is part of a great ritual that links the community with the spiritual forces of the river, which it represents and signifies a great deal ensemble. But in the 19th century, German colonialists stole a magnificent ship's spur, leaving the community without its arts, that represent the strength of people, culture, tradition, among other meanings. Furthermore, in 1894, German warships carried out a massacre against the Cameroonian people in Douala, in addition to the stolen art. At present, the piece of art it is located in the Museum Fünf Kontinente in München, but the tangue has been sought for the restitution by Prince Kum-Andumbe, as he claims to be the rightful heir to the ship's spur taken illegally from the town. Despite this, the conflict has not been resolved since Uta Berlich, director of the Museum of the Five Continents, suggests that the problem is the lack of evidence that will prove that the prince is the legitimate heir of Tulok Priso, the person who was snatched the tangue. Cultural appropriation pieces such as the tangue are exhibited and made accessible to more people, achieving multicultural learning, but they do not have the same meaning as they do in their place of origin. Prince Kum-Andumbe is waiting for a resolution to the conflict, and he is everlasting in his desire to reclaim the tangue. He has even collected all of the documents that prove his legacy, but he's still awaiting an answer to bring home.
The Hoa Hakananai is a monolithic stone statue built on Revenue on Easter Island in approximately 1200 after Christ. Originally, it was located inside a ceremonial house of the ceremonial center called Orongo in Revenue. However, in November 1868, it was stolen and transferred to England, where Queen Victoria donated to the British Museum in London. It is important to recognize the historical events that occurred at that time in question of both cultures. At the beginning of the 19th century, a period began characterized by violence and exploitation of the Revenue people, which gave way to the loss of religious elements and cultural characteristics of the people, as is the case of the Hoa Hakananai. In 2018, some inhabitants of the island proposed to the English government to build a replica of the statue to donate it to the British Museum in London in exchange for the original monumentum. However, the museum authorities argue that there is no conservation plan for this sculpture on Easter Island, so they refuse the access. Faced with a situation like this, it is important to recognize the historical and, above all, cultural relevance that this piece means for the revenue. The Hoa Hakananai has added spiritual value with respect of the rest of the Moai, since it marks the historical moment when the ancient inhabitants lost confidence in the cult of the ancestors, the Moai, and a new cult of Tangata Manu, the man-bird. For the revenues, this statue identifies values that belong to the community and give meaning to such as an extraordinary worldview, such as family, spirit, and culture, so that to this day, it is present in the oral narrative, in songs, and in revenue practices. And also, for our viewers, it will be much more enriching to be able to appreciate such a work in the place where it was built, where the inhabitants know the political, religious, and social background of the time.
The history behind this work of art is quite interesting, as it initially belonged to Tenochtitlan and it is now in the Weltmuseum Wien or World Museum of Vienna. There are several theories regarding the extraction of this work of art, as it could be a gift from Mexicas to Carlos V, but it also could be looted from the coffers of the Tlatoni Palace. Others believe that a conqueror used it as an outfit to clothe himself with the Hispanic god, as Quetzalcoatl. The event that gave rise to the stealing of the work of art was the discovery of America by Christopher Columbus, as a genocide was committed to indigenous people, Aztecs, sought to steal their precious materials such as gold, silver, and many other things. This type of events gave rise to adhering a sense of thievery to Spanish culture, as it victimizes Hispanic culture, and it changes their identities forever. It is now impossible to return the work of art to a Mexican museum because of its poor state. Moving the work of art back to Mexico via airplanes would damage the work of art severely, and thus important losses would occur. Solutions that were given to these situations were that Mexicans that present their passport to the museum were given free entrance, as there is no reason for them to pay to see their stolen works of art, although this is not the definite solution, as it does not cover all the damage that was done to Aztecs in their time.
A possible solution to resolve the conflict many countries are facing with historical artifacts placed in foreign museums and galleries will be to first acknowledge the means in which the artifacts are taken. Then it's necessary to begin a dialogue between the nations and cultures involved, including heritage protection agencies and organizations, in order to discuss and find an optimal solution to the conflict. The return of the artifacts to their countries of origin will be the best way to acknowledge and leave behind any trace of unfair past actions, planning the proper transportation and settlement of the artifacts in the countries of origin beforehand. If the artifacts are too fragile to be transported, museums and galleries could take the initiative of not charging citizens or people belonging to said countries and pay taxes for the possession of the art. If museums refuse to return the art collection, they could come economically with the origin country or community that made the art, where they are paid a certain amount every so often to compensate for the work that was taken. Further, as we have already mentioned, museums' access should be free to that origin groups can view the works and get a closer look at their heritage.
For me, the most important thing I take from this course is the fact that we need to acknowledge and question why certain works of art belonging to one culture or country are currently located and displayed in another, trying to find solutions to this issue, as most governments want their pieces back in their nations, and trying to find solutions that benefit both parties and that we're able to make up for previous mistakes.
During this project, I acquired different perspective about the works of art, heritage, and how a given conflict affects multiple cultures and changes their identities forever. As the continuous feedback loop with the heritage and culture changed little by little the perspective of a culture. Stolen goods, such as works of art, damages the image of multiple cultures involved, and so a clear repair is not possible. One has to acknowledge the multiple groups that are involved in the problem in order to give the best response according to a given action in the past.
In my opinion, art is full of history, containing a lot of meaning and value. So for all the countries, it represents too much. But today, I believe that the most important thing is to preserve the art and ensure its accessibility to all people, for which dialogue and cultural exchange are vital to avoid any kind of conflict and keep in the right hands the art.
I think this course was incredible because we learned and discussed about many topics related with culture, cultural diversity, identity, culture and conflict, and how we should recognize the importance of respecting and valuing this. And also we learned about art and how people express with us and express their own culture, context, and so on. So that's why it is important for us to learn how to do a formal analysis of works of art so we are able to understand it better